Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Adrian Kiorkof, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 2 running back rankings going into the 2020 fantasy football season. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about my top 36 running back rankings, as we always do here on the channel. And then we're also going to be mentioning matchups, because again, we always like to focus on strength of schedule here. So we'll focus on Week 2, see who has the most advantageous or disadvantageous positions going into Week 2. Again, it's basically going to be who's playing against the Carolina Panthers and who's playing against the Pittsburgh Steelers. We'll talk about matchups there. But speaking of the Pittsburgh Steelers, I also wanted to talk about waiver wires and the teams that I did not mention in yesterday's episode. If you guys have not checked out my waiver wire episode that I posted yesterday, go check that out. It's there on the channel. But today I wanted to go ahead and talk about the 4 teams I didn't mention because I had recorded that video prior to the Monday night game. So I want to talk about the Steelers, the Titans, the Giants, and the Denver Broncos and their potential waiver wire additions going into Week 2. So before we begin, I gotta thank you guys again for the incredible support. We're almost there. 23,000 subscribers is just within arm's reach. We can get there. Help us support the channel. Click that subscribe button. Be a friend. Tell a friend. I know it's tough to tell a friend about your secret fantasy channel. I see you guys down in the comment section always saying it, but I really do appreciate you guys' continued support. So thank you very much again. For those of you who are looking to support the channel elsewhere and get more content, I do, updated rankings, community Discord, a bunch of stuff like that. All the information down below over there at patreon.com/Andrew Kiorkof for those of you who are interested. Okay, so like I was mentioning, I wanted to go ahead and start off and talk about waiver wire additions. A couple players that we needed to cover from yesterday's games that really did produce and deserve to be touted and or kind of talked about going into Week 2. Again, the fact that James Conner got injured is such an unfortunate happening. Again, he's injured. And though it seems like it continues to happen to James Conner, he's going to be back. It's just an ankle sprain, and I believe he will eventually be back. So when it comes to Snell Jr. and his potential, he had an incredible game yesterday, 19 carries for 113 yards, which again, we expected because I was telling you guys, the New York Giants don't have a good defense. And of course, the Pittsburgh Steelers are coming out, Big Ben's revitalized and ready to go. And they dominated them. But Snell Jr. plays against Denver this week. It's going to be a tougher matchup. But again, if he's the starting running back, he's going to get almost 20 touches in a game. That in itself has a lot of value. In terms of where I would rank him in my ranking, he'd probably be the third running back you want to go after, or potentially even the second running back if, in fact, you were a James Conner owner and you're trying to go ahead and handcuff there. Outside of him on the Pittsburgh Steelers, again, I'm pretty sure a majority of your leagues own Deontay Johnson. And in Yahoo's, he's owned in 87% of leagues. So outside of that, there really isn't much. We already talked about Ben Roethlisberger as a guy that you should have started last week if you had him because, again, of the matchup. But outside of that, not really much from the Steelers. Moving on to the New York Giants, their opponent. Darius Slayton absolutely was incredible. He's owned in 76% of Yahoo leagues at this moment in time. 9 targets, 6 catches for 102 yards and 2 touchdowns. Another guy to look at. Outside of him, again, Sterling Shepard is still not a bad option. Still had 6 targets, 6 receptions for 47 yards. And with Golden Tate still being injured and the inefficiencies of Evan Ingram, Shepard could still be an option there. But of course, Darius Slayton far and away the better option of the two, considering his touchdown upside and incredible play from yesterday. Moving on, our next options were from the late night game between the Titans and the Broncos. Speaking of the Titans, of course, Derrick Henry touched the ball 34 times, and we'll talk about that in a little bit as he's on the thumbnail today. But he was ridiculous. He was a bowling ball. But Corey Davis was truly the offensive X factor and the reason why the Tennessee Titans were able to win that game with 8 targets, had 7 receptions and 101 receiving yards. A little bit of a revitalization for Corey Davis. The first time he's been relevant in fantasy since 2018. That's right. And 2018 wasn't even a great year for that team because of Marcus Mariota's injuries and then them having to rotate a quarterback. Just really wasn't a great year, but Corey Davis was efficient there and had fantasy value per se. So if he can go ahead and find himself finding more value there, that's great. He's only owned in 5% of leagues. Jonnu Smith scores a touchdown. We love to see tight ends score touchdowns because, again, guys like Evan Ingram are going to put up those dud weeks. We need to have a good guy for a matchup purpose. Throw them in there. Jonnu Smith was great yesterday, but usually he's probably owned in majority of your leagues. Outside of that, Adam Humphries was fine. A.J. Brown fell off a little bit, but that's just the wide receiver position. The volatility there kind of scary. And then, of course, Ryan Tannehill still on that streak playing well. The last team we have to cover, the Denver Broncos. Noah Fant. I've been telling you guys since the summer, Noah Fant, TJ Hawkinson. Draft them in the 12th and the 13th round back-to-back. It doesn't matter. They're going to be great because of their pedigree and their opportunity within said offenses. They have to be the guys that be the breakout players this year. They both scored this week. They both had great opportunity over he had 5 receptions, both of the guys. To be honest, Not surprised there with Courtland Sutton out. But again, I think that's probably the only option that will maybe be available. Jerry Jeudy, if he's still available in your league, he should have already been picked up due to Courtland Sutton's injury. But again, that is pretty much covering everything waiver wire wise. A couple names that I wanted to throw out there as guys that you could potentially look out for. So now before we begin talking about our rankings, again, we always talk about strength of schedule here. So I'm going to go ahead and pop up the strength of schedule going into week 2. Now, this chart on the left of myself is going to be here every single week for every single, running back, wide receiver, tight end, quarterback ranking list. This basically shows how many points defenses gave up to opposing running backs on a weekly basis in a half PPR scoring format. So last week, the Arizona Cardinals gave up the most points to opposing running backs with 43.2 points to a combination of Raheem Mostert, Tevin Coleman, Kyle Juszczyk, and or Jerick McKinnon. So that group of the 4 running backs / fullback from the San Francisco 49ers, they dominated the Arizona Cardinals in terms of points there. Looking down below, we pretty much find ourselves with the Washington football team, the Los Angeles Chargers, and the Pittsburgh Steelers as teams that really stopped the run heavily. I mean, the Steelers only allowed 7 rushing yards yesterday from Saquon Barkley. That in itself kind of should bring everyone's attention to, wow, just how good is that front 7? You don't really want to play them, and that's why it's kind of scary for Denver this week because they have to take on that team. But we were talking about earlier, who plays against the Carolina Panthers? Great. That's Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette. They should have a great game this week. But again, they're going to be splitting a little bit. Ronald Jones should be the lead back there this week, so should be good to go. On top of that, the Jacksonville Jaguars, who plays against them? Well, none other than Derrick Henry on the thumbnail. Why is he on this thumbnail today? Because he's got an incredible matchup this week after coming off 34 carries in week 1 and over 100 scrimmage yards for the 9th game in a row that he's done that. Like, it's unstoppable at this point. But again, just throwing this up on screen for those of you who want, you can go ahead and pause, look at it, get a little bit of an understanding of who's giving up a lot of receptions in the passing game. Maybe you want to go after that. Who's been giving up a lot of yards per carry, all that kind of stuff, touchdowns. You can check that out, and hopefully, guys, it helps you guys out this upcoming week on going forward. But again, this will be here. All right, so let's go ahead and let's start talking about my running back rankings going into week 2. Starting off with my number 1, we have ourselves Ezekiel Elliott. Now, you may have expected Derrick Henry to be number 1 because, again, I just talked him up. But, again, you're starting these guys regardless. I think anybody within the top 24 is probably being started automatically, just to kind of put it in perspective. So, as of this moment in time, Ezekiel Elliott's my number 1. He gets to play against the Atlanta defense. And, I mean, Ezekiel Elliott was incredible in week 1. I haven't seen Zeke come out the gates and play that well in a week 1 in a very long time. And I know you may be thinking, Andrew, he held out last year. Of course, he was garbage last year, week 1. But in his whole career, I have not seen Zeke just play so well despite even their offensive line struggles. I mean, Lyle Collins was not healthy, did not play on Sunday. And Zeke was still a force to be reckoned with. 25 touches, 3 through the air, a total of 127 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 on the ground, 1 through the air. That in itself is incredible, but just watching him be able to dice up this this Rams defense was incredible. So I think Zeke going into this Atlanta matchup, I know Atlanta got torched in terms of the passing game, but you could definitely run the ball in Atlanta. That is a team that is definitely susceptible to that. And I think Zeke, once again, this upcoming week will be relied upon and is going to have himself an incredible game. He's my number 1 running back on the week. So we go ahead and we move to Derrick Henry. Of course, Derrick Henry is my number 2. I know I kind of debated you guys a little bit there, but either way, Derrick Henry is going to have a monster game. I mean, just thinking about what he's capable of, the amount of touches he had just this past week against Denver, and what he's done in the past against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Last season, I mean, week 12 against the Jacksonville Jaguars had 175 yards total and 2 rushing touchdowns. Derrick Henry always dominates against the Jaguars. We have to remember going back to 2018, that 200-yard rushing game with 4 rushing touchdowns, one of the greatest running back performances of all time in terms of fantasy. Derrick Henry did that on the Jacksonville Jaguars. He hung that up on them. And unfortunately, Jaguars will be subject to the running attack of the Titans this week, and they're going to have to survive, and I don't think they will for very long. Derrick Henry is my number 2 on the week. Number 3 is Christian McCaffrey. You were wondering, where is Christian McCaffrey going to come into this situation, considering he wasn't on the list as the number 1? The issue with Christian McCaffrey, despite the fact that you're going to start him regardless, is that he plays against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers front 7. And from what we've seen the Tampa Bay Buccaneers do to teams, especially just looking at last week against Alvin Kamara and Latavius Murray, they really did not allow them to have much productivity in that offense. I mean, it was not a clean transition there for Alvin Kamara. Even though Alvin Kamara scored touchdowns, got work in the passing game, they just really had to earn yards against that front seven, and we knew that was going to happen. But Christian McCaffrey last year against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers averaged only 1.8 yards per carry against them. And the only time that he actually had a good performance against them was the second time he played them, in which he scored 2 touchdowns and had a little bit of work in the passing game. But typically, they really do lock down Christian McCaffrey, and they make it really hard for him to succeed. That being said, hopefully Christian McCaffrey is going to get more utilization in the passing game, find himself in the end zone, because again, the rushing yardage that he had in week 1, for example, against the Las Vegas Raiders, the 134 yards and 26 total touches, that might be reduced heavily. Because again, that front seven is no joke. They're going to get after him and Teddy Bridgewater. So regardless, you're still playing him, but be wary of the matchup. It is definitely a tough one for our boy McCaffrey. Moving on, we have ourselves number 4, Saquon Barkley. I know Barkley really struggled, but for you guys in a PPR, he kind of saved the week with his receiving game. 9 targets, 6 receptions. That's great. We love to see that. But Saquon Barkley does not have to deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers front seven anymore. Instead, he goes against the Chicago Bears. And what we just witnessed Adrian Peterson accomplish in week 1 against the Chicago Bears was incredible. I mean, he absolutely ran the ball down their throat, had over 120 total yards from scrimmage, whether it was on the ground or through the passing game. If I'm not mistaken, I think Adrian Peterson had like 14 carries for 93 yards on the ground. Saquon is going to eat this upcoming week. I expect him to have himself a bounce back week despite the terribly tough matchup against Pittsburgh. Saquon is my number 5 running back on the week is Dalvin Cook. And though Dalvin Cook struggled a little bit last week, he still found himself in the end zone twice. 2 touchdowns is always going to make everything better, regardless of your yards per carry, but he was still pretty effective on the ground. I think the game script really did lean them away from using him last week, and though I would have loved to see him be used in the passing game more, and Alexander Madison's usage there, that's a little concerning to an extent. Alexander Madison touching the ball 10 times in a week isn't a big deal if in fact Dalvin Cook is getting twice as many touches. But when Dalvin Cook's touching the ball, 14, 15 times, and Alexander Madison's touching the ball 10 times, that's a little concerning. Again, he could vulture a touchdown. He could take some work in the passing game. That is an unfortunate, byproduct of this offense. But again, I think it all had to do with the fact that Green Bay was up early. I think when, in fact, they play against the Indianapolis Colts this week, they're going to run the ball down their throat. I mean, James Robinson had himself a successful week. Gardner Minshew was unstoppable, 19 for 20 passing. I mean, come on. This offense for the Vikings, they're going to go, and they're going to dominate Indianapolis because, again, they were struggling heavily. Hopefully, Indy turns it around, but I don't think that's the case. Dalvin Cook's my number 5. Our number 6 on hand today is Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara had a great week 1, despite an incredibly difficult matchup against Tampa Bay. Again, Tampa Bay, Pittsburgh, New Orleans, these are defenses that do not allow anything on the ground in terms of the running back position. That being said, Alvin Kamara, 5 catches, 51 yards, and a receiving touchdown. On top of that, had a rushing touchdown. Late in the game, had a rushing touchdown called back because they said he stepped out of bounds. It was a turnover on downs. Honestly, could have had 3 touchdowns. And 3 touchdowns in a singular week from Alvin Kamara kind of reminds me of that 2018 stat line where he scored 14 touchdowns on the ground and 4 through the air and was an absolute top 5 running back in fantasy. If we can go ahead and find ourselves in that direction. The fact that they play against the Las Vegas Raiders this week, that is very exciting in my opinion. On top of that, the passing work is going to always be there. What Christian McCaffrey did to them last week, Christian McCaffrey had the 134 yards and 2 touchdowns, 3 catches, all that kind of stuff. I think Alvin Kamara easily gets that accomplished. If Michael Thomas misses time, that's going to lead to more opportunity around this offense, and Alvin Kamara could potentially see that. He is my number 6 on the week. Our number 7, here we go. Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I mean, Clyde Edwards had an incredible Thursday night game, and though this entire weekend is kind of brushed over, do not forget how incredible Clyde Edwards was on Thursday night. Over 100 rushing yards. Didn't even get utilized in the passing game yet. I mean, he is a receiving back at his core. That is, in my opinion, his most valuable asset. His hands and his ability to make plays after the catch. Clyde Edwards this upcoming week. plays against the Chargers defense. And though the Chargers look pretty good and they stopped Joe Mixon, I don't think they're going to be able to stop this Kansas City offense as they spread them thin and be able to kind of dominate and pick and choose how they want to attack this Chargers, up front seven. Who, in my opinion, though they have the Linval Joseph, it's going to be pretty tough for them to stop this Kansas City attack. Clyde Edwards, again, the fact that he had so many goal line red zone touches leads me to believe that they're going to he could have honestly, in my opinion, had 3 rushing touchdowns on Thursday night and had a 40-point week like I was predicting, that huge pop. He didn't get there, but he really could have gotten to that 30-point week just because of the game script, the ability to get, cause some turnovers and find yourself in the red zone. Clyde Edwards was knocking on the door for 3 touchdowns. He was close. Again, he needs to maybe sharpen up, or the offense needs to sharpen up their goal line approach. But again, Clyde Edwards, another incredible prospect this week. Moving on to number 8, we have ourselves Nick Chubb. I know Nick Chubb was a disappointment in week 1, but there's a reason why we ranked him in the mid-teens. Because again, the Baltimore defense is no joke. And Baltimore always full sends running backs. They stack the box, and they know when Nick Chubb's on the field, they want to run the ball. They did that. They stuffed him. They forced Baker to make turnovers. They took the lead. They extended that lead, and they forced Nick Chubb off the field via game script. Now, Nick Chubb going into this week, it's a short week. They play against Cincinnati on Thursday night. I think because of that, and the fact that Nick Chubb only touched the ball 10 times in week 1, he is very healthy. In fact, he probably feels decently well. He probably is ready to go. Doesn't even need to practice this week. Just needs to stay healthy, hydrated, go into week 2 on Thursday night against Cincinnati and run the ball all over them, because we've seen him do it in the past. And I expect this team to really have to establish the running game. It was embarrassing what happened to them. Though Nick Chubb's yard per carry average and Kareem Hunt's yard per carry average were great, they weren't allowed to run the ball in the second half as much as they would have wanted to, because they were not in a position to be able to run the ball. Hopefully this week, because of Cincinnati's inexperience and or defensive struggles, again, Austin Ekeler ran pretty well on them with his 20 total touches. I think Nick Chubb on hand here could be a great prospect. He's my number 8. Number 9 is Josh Jacobs. Now, I'm concerned about Josh Jacobs. I have the same concern about Josh Jacobs that I had about Alvin Kamara last week and or Saquon Barkley. He plays against a very good run-stopping defense. We always talk about New Orleans every single year as a front seven that is going to fill the gaps and not allow you anything. Now, that being said, it's a Monday night game. They get an extra day to rest, and they get an extra day to scheme against this defense. Looking at what the Las Vegas Raiders were able to accomplish and the effectiveness and or talent they have up front in their offensive line, and then the tight end position with Jason Witten blocking as well, I think that we could sneakily see Josh Jacobs have a decent game. We're not going to see a 100-yard, 3-touchdown game like he did against Carolina, but if he continues to get utilized in the passing game, again, 6 targets, 4 receptions for 46 yards, that is an incredible number that I didn't even expect. I thought, okay, you know what? He was blowing smoke saying he wants to catch the ball 60 times, but if you're going to catch the ball 3 or 4 times a week, that is going to take Josh Jacobs to the next level. And even when he struggles on the ground, can find himself on the field on 3rd downs, 2nd downs, and being utilized there. I think it's fantastic. And going to this week, Josh Jacobs, though he is going to struggle against the matchup, we're going to start him regardless because he's Josh Jacobs and we trust the process. We go ahead and we move on here to our next running back on hand. We have Joe Mixon at 10. And though Joe Mixon struggled, pretty heavily this past week, and Joe Burrow scored a touchdown, and he wasn't really utilized very much in the passing game while Giovanni Bernard and his beautiful mustache was. Joe Mixon this week should be fine. Looking at what Joe Mixon's done in the past against Cleveland, I look at last year's stats. In the 2 games that he played against the Cleveland Browns last season, he totaled 300 total rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. So he was averaging about 1.5 touchdowns per game and 150 rushing yards per game against them. Most recently in week 17 of last year, where he just ran all over them and it was honestly unstoppable. So Joe Mixon going into this week, hopefully will be, utilized on the ground. We got to see Joe Mixon get the touches. That's the thing that I've been touting this all offseason. If you feed this man opportunity, he will produce with it. Unfortunately, wasn't given as much opportunity as I would like to have seen from him. Again, 14 touches needs to turn into 20 for him. He needs to be a workhorse back. They need to use him as such. Hopefully this week is the week. Again, he didn't really get used that much last week, so hopefully they're going to let him free on Thursday night. Kenyan Drake is our number 11, and Kenyan Drake, similar to Nick Chubb and or Joe Mixon, was a little bit underutilized this past week, but Again, it all had to do with the matchup. The 49ers, again, were a great run-stopping defense. That being said, Kenyan Drake averaged, over 4 yards per carry, played well. Kyler Murray was running the ball very effectively, scored a rushing touchdown. Chase Edmonds was being used in this backfield primarily as a receiving back, but again, when in the backfield, you can give him a draw play, you can give him a couple early down runs, and he's a capable back himself. But Kenyan Drake, going into this upcoming week against the Washington football team, I think Washington football team, the fact that they gave up the least points to opposing running backs is a little bit misleading. I think though the Eagles struggled heavily, the fact that Boston Scott left the game early, Miles Sanders didn't play, that kind of leads to that statistic. So I'm not really afraid of this. I think Kenyan Drake's going to have himself a great week, even with the utilization of Chase Edmonds. I think Drake is the goal line back. I think he's going to be utilized more. I think he's going to get more opportunity, and that's going to lead to his ultimate success. So this week, Kenyan Drake at 11 is a very comfortable position for me. Aaron Jones is our number 12 this week, and though Aaron Jones shared the backfield with 3 other running backs this past week in Green Bay versus Minnesota, Aaron Jones still had 20 touches. The Rodgers-led offense was unstoppable, and they played against Minnesota, which is a very good defense. I know they had -4 points, but guys, Minnesota knows what they're doing. Mike Zimmer is going to get them back on track. I can assure you that. Now, that being said, the Green Bay Packers play against Detroit this week, and Detroit, not that good of a run-stopping defense, not that good of a defense in general. So I think Aaron Jones, this offense for Green Bay, it's going to eventually continue to just keep on working, keep on kicking. Again, Jamal Williams is going to get some touches here and there. We saw a little bit of A.J. Dillon, another running back in there. What was it, Tyler Ervin? Again, a lot of running backs in this backfield, a lot of cooks in the kitchen, but the leading guy is Aaron Jones. The goal line guy is Aaron Jones. That was proven this week, so it's great to see. We move on here to Chris Carson at number 13. Chris Carson wasn't even utilized in the running game. He had 6 rushing attempts this past week, and that doesn't really concern me at all because a lot of people might look at it and be like, he only touched the ball 6 times on the ground. Carlos Hyde stole a rushing touchdown. Chris Carson's washed. He's injured. No, guys, no. Listen, they didn't have to run the ball because Russell Wilson was unstoppable through the air. And to be honest, I think the Seattle offense should transition to just letting Russell Wilson carry the team. I think it's a long time coming that Russell Wilson deserves to have every single opportunity to win games. And that's what he needed to do. He needed to put up 40 points in order to beat the Falcons because the Falcons offense is a great overall offense. Now, the fact that Chris Carson is utilized in the passing game and catches 2 receiving touchdowns, that is what separates him from different running backs. Because now that he goes into week 2 and Pete Carroll comes out and says yesterday, we needed to run the ball more. We needed to kill more clock. We needed to give Atlanta less opportunities. Beautiful. You play against the New England Patriots, Sunday Night Football. Is that going to be enjoyable? Yes, it is. And I think Chris Carson's up for the task. Again, he's going to be pounding the rock. And with very limited work, he didn't really get hit many times last week. Only, touched the ball 10 times? I think Chris Carson's ready to go into week 2 and pretty much be the hammer while everyone on that Patriots defense is the nail. So, again, they're probably going to have to again as well because that secondary for the Patriots, a pretty good secondary. So they have a fresh Chris Carson going into this upcoming week. So that should be exciting. We move on to number 14 here, and that's Austin Ekeler. Now, Austin Ekeler loses a little bit of his hype for me, not because of a bad performance, because in my opinion, that's not a bad performance. 19 carries for 80-something yards. That is great, honestly, because Austin Ekeler touching the ball 19 times, that's workhorse back territory, and I love to see that. If Austin Ekeler scores a touchdown in week 1, we don't have this conversation right now. He doesn't sit at 14. He sits at number 9, and everybody gets moved down a peg. So, putting into perspective. But if he does not get the utilization in the passing game that we need him to get, touchdowns are always going to be a carousel. Is he going to score a touchdown? Is he not? That is always going to be the question, especially for an offense that struggled as much as the Chargers did. They get to take on the defending champs this week. And Kansas City was no joke. And though Kansas City is very susceptible to a gun running attack and running scheme, if Austin Ekeler isn't used early or often in the passing game, I think the score is going to get out of hand. I think Kansas City is going to come up big. And if Austin Ekeler is not getting work in the passing game, he's going to disappear. And that is going to be unfortunate. And then we're going to start counting the days until Justin Herbert becomes the quarterback of this team. That's honestly what it's going to turn into. But I hope that's not the case. Hopefully Ekeler is used in the passing game. Hopefully he gets some goal line touches because otherwise he's pretty good on the ground. Again, He's a top 14 back. You're starting him regardless. He's a great play. Raheem Mostert's number 15. Raheem Mostert surprised a lot of people. I mean, when we talk about Ekeler not catching passes, the fact that Raheem Mostert is catching passes, and not even just catching a pass, he caught a pass and went to the house for a 70+ yard touchdown, 60-yard touchdown. Great. Beautiful. We love to see it, especially when Jimmy Garoppolo is struggling to pass the ball. Checkdowns are always going to be his best friend. So that's always good to see. Raheem Mostert's utilization in the passing game, great. I think he had about 15 touches on the ground, 4 through the air, 20 total touches, almost at 19. Almost at that workhorse level. But again, Tevin Coleman, Jerick McKinnon, those are going to continue to impede on his overall productivity. That's why he doesn't jump into this top 12 conversation as much and rather sits in this top 15 conversation because, again, Jerick McKinnon and Tevin Coleman are going to touch the ball. They play against the New York Jets this week, a very easy matchup. I think they could take advantage of it early and go ahead and just dominate with it. So Raheem Mostert should be a great play this week. Outside of that, nothing really needs to be said. I love the fact that he's getting used in the passing game. That's just an extra dimension that I did not anticipate him doing. Jonathan Taylor starts us off at number 16 because obviously, like we mentioned yesterday, Marlon Mack is out for the season. A torn Achilles ends his year. And as much as I hate to even say those words, it really does suck for Marlon Mack because Marlon Mack is a good running back and was probably going to be the starter to begin this year. But Jonathan Taylor is now really put into the spotlight. Jonathan Taylor needs to be able to produce and he needs to be able to dominate in this backfield and prove to everyone why he was drafted in the second round and why this offensive line is going to batter teams. Now, Jonathan Taylor's utilization of the passing game last week against the Jaguars, incredible. 6 catches on 6 targets for 67 yards. I mean, it is 100% a fact that if Phillip Rivers is in offense, he's feeding his receivers the ball, his running backs the ball. I mean, they're practically receivers at this point, right? So on top of the fact that he's going to get work in the passing game, goal line work, and eventually all the running down work, because again, Nyheim Hines will be sprinkled here and there like the Austin Ekeler to the Melvin Gordon. That's what Jonathan Taylor will be. Jonathan Taylor is going to have a lot of upside. Minnesota is a tougher matchup, but again, they want to run the ball. He'll have his utilization in the passing game, which will kind of even him out. Hopefully a touchdown, starts him off for his first career touchdown in the NFL. That'll be nice. Jonathan Taylor's my 16. 17 is David Johnson. And though David Johnson plays against a very tough matchup, Baltimore on hand, David Johnson looked great last week, Thursday night. 7 yards per carry, 11 rushes for 77 yards, rushing touchdown, 3 receptions for 30 receiving yards. Great. Overall, productive week. We couldn't ask for anything more. Maybe a couple more touches. 14 touches isn't a lot, but maybe 18 touches. We get him an extra layer of depth. A couple more opportunities could end up popping off for one. But either way, David Johnson going into the Baltimore matchup scares me because what does the game script have in store? The game script at this moment in time in my eyes is the Baltimore Ravens take a huge lead and they blow out the Houston Texans. And why do I think that? Because they did that last year. They literally did it in 2019. It wasn't that long ago. It was actually later in the season too. They just blew them out and they ran away with that game. So I think about it this way. Baltimore is probably going to be running out the clock. David Johnson and Deshaun Watson probably not going to have a lot of time to produce. So unless David Johnson produces early on the running game, he's going to be utilized in the passing game. With Duke Johnson's ankle injury, David Johnson gets a little bit more opportunities in the passing game. That could lead to his ultimate success, and I like that idea. So David Johnson sits at 17. Number 18 is Todd Gurley. Todd Gurley was fine in week 1. Didn't get as much work in the passing game as we would have liked. Ito Smith and Brian Hill caught themselves 3 catches and 2 catches, while Gurley caught 2 or 1 pass. Not a really big deal, but again, Todd Gurley's not looking like he's, catching any passes anymore, unfortunately, like he used to back in 2017 and 2018. But in terms of on the ground, I think Todd Gurley kind of disappeared because the offense was forced to pass the ball so heavily in the second half. Prior to that, in the first half, pretty good overall. It was about a 4 yard per carry average. It had a touchdown. He was moving the rock, and that's great. But if they play against Dallas and Dallas takes a huge lead like the Seattle Seahawks did on that secondary and on that defense, Todd Gurley will disappear a little bit more this week. But hopefully they can come out early, establish a lead, and then start running the ball with Gurley to give him a little bit more value. But otherwise, he had a great week in week 1. Mark Ingram's our number 19. So what do we do with Mark Ingram, right? He got 2 touchdowns vultured. He did not play well, overall in terms of his yards per carry, and just really was a mess. So what do we do with Mark Ingram? Well, we don't bench him because benching Mark Ingram would be basically saying that week 1 is the end-all be-all and that is going to determine the ultimate success for every single player. And that's not the case. Houston's run defense is horrible. We saw Clyde Edwards-Helaire go for 134 on them on the ground, and he is a small running back. Mark Ingram is a smaller running back. Give him the ball. He's going to run. Last time he played against Houston, he scored 2 touchdowns. He is going to be the running back that starts the game. And though J.K. Dobbins can come in and be sprinkled in this offense, Mark Ingram is going to produce this upcoming week in my eyes. And I think number 19, again, is another place where you are going to start this running back. And honestly, it's a great matchup on hand. It should lead to his success. I know Lamar Jackson's there, and he will take some carries here and there, and so will J.K. Dobbins, so will Gus Edwards. But Mark Ingram is the lead back in this offense. Don't get that mistaken. Ronald Jones is our number 20. And Ronald Jones is right now. I mean, against Carolina, the fact that he touched the ball as much as he did in week 1, that is pretty exciting. Now, though I would love to see Leonard Fournette get a little bit more opportunity, I think that'll happen over time. Because again, Leonard Fournette hasn't learned the offense yet, and they really just have him there as an insurance policy. Ronald Jones touched the ball 19 times against the New Orleans defense and honestly played pretty well in comparison to a lot of other running backs that I've seen over the past go against that defense. So again, Ronald Jones, pretty good performance. That being said, he plays against Carolina, and we just watched Josh Jacobs touch the ball 25 plus times, dominated in the passing game, on the ground. Even Devontae Booker came in, the former running back of the Denver Broncos. He's on the Las Vegas Raiders. He was great in the passing game and on the ground. So Ronald Jones should be great. Top 20, honestly, seems like I've got him a little too low. Maybe he's got to be better, to be honest. So he could honestly just he could be top 15 back this week easily. With the touchdown upside, easily there. Moving on. We have ourselves number 21, David Montgomery. And though David Montgomery's been dealing with the groin injury, and we didn't know if he was going to come back in week 1, and then all of a sudden, he practices fully on Thursday and Friday. Going into this week, I kind of look at David Montgomery and I think to myself, well, he's got himself a pretty good opportunity playing against, again, a defense that isn't really, I don't know, are they up to the task? Is the New York Giants up to the task after Benny Snell runs all over them for, 100 plus yards, the second player in the 2020 season to go for over 100 rushing yards? David Montgomery, in my eyes, hopefully will be utilized. Hopefully they'll just pound the rock and just dominate that New York defense. And I think David Montgomery with the touchdown upside, 21 is the perfect spot for him. Number 22 is Kareem Hunt. Similar to Nick Chubb. Again, they're going to probably beat up on the Cincinnati defense in terms of running the ball and or catching the ball out of the backfield, but Kareem Hunt has a lot of value there. If the game script gets out of hand, he's going to be utilized. The fact that he out-touched Nick Chubb, the fact that he had 17 touches last week, 13 on the ground and 4 through the air, that in itself, an extra, level of production for him. Cincinnati's matchup, in my opinion, again, if Nick Chubb is going to disappear at times and or Kareem Hunt's going to be given goal line touches and steal touchdowns here and there, it just continues to have him be a flex starter for every single week throughout the regular season. So he sits at 22. Number 23 is Nyheim Hines, the waiver wire monster of week 1. The guy that honestly, as of right now, is the Austin Ekeler of 2020. Unfortunately for Austin Ekeler. I love you, Austin Ekeler, but Nyheim Hines did your job, but he did it better on a different team. Nyheim Hines, though he's not built like Austin Ekeler, I don't know if he's got the longevity in this. He was just incredible. 8 catches on 8 targets, a receiving touchdown, a rushing touchdown, 7 rushing attempts for 28 yards. I know that yard per carry average isn't great, but honestly, it's sitting there and it's looking pretty with Marlon Mack going down, unfortunately. Jonathan Taylor is going to be the Melvin Gordon. Nyheim Hines is going to be the Austin Ekeler. And I think both these guys are going to be very, very relevant and or impactful to your lineups going forward. I wouldn't mind starting both of them in a lineup this week. I'm not even kidding. Especially in a PPR, the amount of catches they had, my goodness, is that great. Our number 24 on hand, the last top 24 back, and I think the last running back that I would say you have to start this week, Malcolm Brown. Malcolm Brown was a little bit of a surprise. I thought, yeah, Malcolm Brown's going to be utilized, but Cam Akers is going to win that job, maybe even in week 1. But Malcolm Brown did not allow that to happen. He came out, 21 touches, 110 total yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns. That kind of performance for Malcolm Brown is a little it catches my eye. It's eye-catching a little bit. Now, I think about, okay, Malcolm Brown plays against Philadelphia this week. That's a tough matchup in comparison to the Dallas front 7 that couldn't stop a soul. But like I was mentioning yesterday on my waiver wire, ads, video. Malcolm Brown, a lot of his productivity came from the fact that this Los Angeles Rams offensive line was dominating defenders. I mean, they were literally getting a push 10 yards downfield. There was defensive linemen 10 yards downfield, and that is a huge problem for Dallas, but also a huge up in props to the Los Angeles offensive line. So again, Malcolm Brown, if you're going to have the goal line attempts, you're going to get work in the passing game, especially on screen passes, which again, he's not that athletic, but you're going to give it to him. He's going to produce, get touches on the ground. Malcolm Brown could be a great option this week at my number 24. We move on to our last 12 running backs, and though we'll kind of go through these quickly, we start off with Miles Sanders. I think Miles Sanders, if healthy, going into this week, could be a very good option. Now, the question is going to be if he's healthy, if he's going to play. I think he probably will. I know he missed week 1, but Boston Scott's out. Corey Clement couldn't do anything. And unless they're going to sign a new back like Devontae Freeman, I think Miles Sanders should hopefully come back into this offense. They are in desperate need of a solidified running game to be able to take a little bit of the pressure off of Wentz's back against the Rams, which what Zeke did against them last week. I think Miles Sanders could be great. We move on to our number 26, Devin Singletary. Devin Singletary, though he wasn't starting in the game, and though Zach Moss really off the grip because of that receiving touchdown, oh my God, it's the Zach Moss era. It's over. Devin Singletary is washed. Singletary in the second half had a lot of touches, 14 touches, and exactly to be honest, I think it was 9 touches on the ground, 5 receptions on 8 targets. Those are great numbers. And honestly, though Devin Singletary is kind of being undervalued to an extent, I think the matchup against Miami, that in itself is going to lead to his, fantasy relevance this week. I mean, when we look at what he was able to do last week, he played 60% of the offensive snaps. And going into this upcoming week with Devin Singletary, Zach Moss, that combination, obviously Josh Allen's going to be the leading rusher on this team. But if Devin Singletary can get some rushing attempts like he did last week, lead the pack and be more efficient on the ground, and then also have that utilization in the passing game, I think Devin Singletary could again be a relevant back. I know he struggled in week 1, but Miami's a matchup that I'd like to potentially hone in on. We move on to number 27, J.K. Dobbins. And though I talked about Mark Ingram being a guy that could easily just revitalize himself with a couple touchdowns this week, get some usage in the passing game that gives him a little bit more depth in this offense. J.K. Dobbins is just around the corner. There's a reason why they're giving him rushing touchdowns. There's a reason why they're giving him carries. Though he wasn't efficient, 7 for 22? Dobbins is just around the corner. It only takes one mistake from Mark Ingram, and he's coming to vulture stuff. So, again, J.K. Dobbins is probably one of these flex plays that because of the matchup against Houston, they could be up early, they're rushing him late, and he's literally killing clock and dominating against that defense. I could potentially see that happening. Benny Snell is number 28, and because of how great he was on Monday night, people might overpay for him. And that being the case, he plays against the Denver Broncos, and I think it's going to be a struggle for him. Again, him having his incredible game of over 100 rushing yards and a bunch of carries, that's all good and well. But when you play against a defense that's going to be able to stop the run, as well as they did against Derrick Henry and that Titans offensive line yesterday, I'm thinking to myself, Benny Snell could be in trouble this week. But if he gets some work in the passing game, which I've seen him be able to do, he could end up expanding his game. A touchdown last week probably makes him an even better back, but I think just the matchup in itself this week could end up being a little bit of a struggle for him. Going into the week. Maybe Jalen Samuels comes in and starts catching passes. You never know. Melvin Gordon, the same reason with Benny Snell. They play against each other. Denver has to play against that unstoppable Pittsburgh front seven. I think Melvin Gordon played well. The rushing touchdown almost got vultured by Royce Freeman on a catch down on the sideline. Barely was 1 yard shy. But Denver's running attack has always been something they want to continue to use. Melvin Gordon looked like the starting running back, did not look like anybody was coming to take anything. I know, there was a little bit of usage from Phillip Lindsay, 8 touches, not a big deal. We're not worried about that. Melvin Gordon in the passing game is going to be the real big difference maker because it's going to be a game script worthy game. Can Denver's defense hold Pittsburgh's offense, and will they give Melvin Gordon enough time to, eat up some runs, get some carries, tire out a defense, and then just dominate them in the second half? We'll see. It's going to be tough for them though. James White, number 30. I think any New England Patriot running back is going to fall subject to what Cam Newton decides to do on a weekly basis. If Cam Newton wants to be the starting running back of that team, he's going to be. And that in itself is going to really hurt James White and Sony Michel going forward. James White this week, if in fact we get ourselves a Seattle offense that comes and puts up 40 points on the board, 35 points on the board. James White's going to be used for the majority of the game to try to come back because, again, though the Patriots won, they didn't look great offensively in the passing game. I think James White needs to be used more, and hopefully he will be. Adrian Peterson is our number 31, and like I mentioned, what he did with the Detroit Lions was pretty special. I mean, he continues to prove why he's such a Hall of Famer. 17 touches, 114 total yards. Now he plays against Green Bay. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he had himself another decent game here. DeAndre Swift did potentially have 2 touchdowns last week if he didn't drop that second touchdown. But again, it looks like Adrian Peterson's the lead back here. So we go ahead and we fire him up at number 31 as a potential guy that you may have even picked up this week. Could be a flex option against Green Bay. 32, again, similar to the James White conversation. Sony Michel is going to be subject to whether or not Cam Newton wants to touch the ball and dive it in. Because when you get down to the goal line, that's Cam Newton territory. I mean, back in Carolina, every year, Cam Newton was stealing 6 red zone rushing touchdowns from the 5-yard line and in. So, again, that's probably going to happen this year. It's going to probably impact Sony Michel pretty heavily, especially considering Sony Michel wasn't even that good against the Miami defense in terms of yards per carry. That's tough. Now you play against Seattle. That's a tough matchup. So, again, it's going to be subject to whether or not Cam Newton is running the ball in rather than Sony Michel. Zach Moss is number 33. Again, like Singletary, Moss is going to be in the wings. It's kind of like that Mark Ingram Dobbins situation with Devin Singletary and Moss. Though both of them could be relevant in a singular week, it's a matter of snaps, usage in the passing game, and touchdowns. Zach Moss caught a touchdown last week, and he played a lot early. I think we'll potentially see something of the extent of what exactly the New England Patriots did against them, where the quarterback's running the ball heavily, and then the running backs are just playing second fiddle. That could be something of the extent, but again, Zach Moss could potentially be trusted this week. Number 34 is Leonard Fournette. I don't know what we're going to see. I mean, honestly, Leonard Fournette didn't touch the ball very often this past week, and against Carolina, if Leonard Fournette doesn't get many touches, I'm going to be a little afraid. I think, honestly, Leonard Fournette easily could be a top 24 back. And even if let's say, for example, they gave him all the carries against Carolina, he's a top 12 back. I'm not even joking. If Ronald Jones is in this offense, Leonard Fournette tears up Carolina this week. Our second to last running back, our penultimate running back ranking, is Joshua Kelly. Going to this matchup, again, I think it's very much so game script based. If, in fact, the passing game of the Kansas City Chiefs dominates and forces the Chargers to kind of lean away from running the ball, then Joshua Kelly kind of fades away here, and then we could probably put in a PPR back like Jerick McKinnon or Chase Edmonds, who could potentially be a top 36 guy. But Joshua Kelly, in my opinion, if he's going to play the Melvin Gordon role with Josh Jackson having that quad injury, I think Josh Kelly could potentially be a pretty valuable back going forward. Our last back on hand is James Robinson, the starting running back of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And though the Jacksonville Jaguars did not struggle offensively last week in terms of their total game plan, James Robinson had some usage on the ground, got some touches through the air. That in itself, the fact that he's going to touch the ball as much as they are, it's going to be a matter of what the game script asks of James Robinson. Are they going to have to come back down 50 points? Are they going to have to just stay even and allow Minshew to dominate, but then have a stable running game? That's going to be the question. And though James Robinson is probably a capable 10-point guy, especially with the upside of a touchdown, I think we keep an eye on him. Tennessee matchup, probably a tougher one, but I think that there's a possibility that James Robinson could produce potentially this week, especially if he gets more utilization in the passing game, which, again, 1 catch for 28 yards, not a bad rep there in week 1. Again, these are my top 36 running back rankings. Thank you, everybody, for watching. If you like today's video, smash that like button. Again, these are, subject to change, I would say. A lot of these players are going to fluctuate as we get more information on injuries, updates, trades, all this kind of stuff. These are going to update. Again, don't forget, if you have not checked it out already, my waiver wire video was posted yesterday. Tomorrow is Wide Receiver Wednesday, so don't forget to check that out. Outside of that, make sure you hit that like button today. I really do appreciate it, guys. If we can get past to maybe 1,000 likes, that would be absolutely insane. But you know what? That's all I asked for. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. And until next time, I'll see you guys. Peace.